Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. Today we're going to cover, we're going to review the LT1 and FTS360 and do an overview of these. We're thrilled and grateful that you'll join us with this webinar. We hope it's worth your time. We think it will be. We're going to try to keep this right under an hour. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If I don't let this get away from me here. Before we get started, you'll see on your menu here, you'll see some different options. If you will please make sure that you're muted. At this point, I have everyone muted, but if you'll make sure that you're muted, just keep in mind that if your mic is on, then everyone can hear that. It becomes a lot of background noise. Also, make sure that your video is turned off as well. If you do have questions, you'll see a question box there. We do hope to have a good question answer session at the end, maybe for about 10 minutes or so, depending on how many questions we get. And so if you have questions, let's put them in there and then we'll retrieve them when this is complete. If you do need to leave early, just hit the leave X button and that will help you just leave without it interrupting too much of the webinar. Today, our presenters, we have two of them. Today, our first presenter will be Brad Schaefermeyer, who is our Western Hydrology Sales Manager. He covers the Western states. If you're not in the Western states, you might still know Brad. Brad's been in the industry for 33 years, providing hydrological monitoring solutions throughout the world. I have personally worked with Brad for close to 20 years, and he is well traveled and he's quite knowledgeable in products and solutions. He's installed gauges throughout the world. He's quite knowledgeable in the industry. Brad's also an electrical engineer. He got his degree from DeVry University out of Phoenix. And we're excited to have Brad with us today. We're also excited to have Sean Daniels with us. He is our software development manager. Sean has been doing software design and running development teams for over 20 years. Been with FTS for 4 years. Has had a great deal of influence on a lot of the products that we offer today, and has been progressive in a lot of his thinking and a lot of the things that we're doing. Prior to FTS, he spent time at Microsoft as well as a couple of other software firms. Sean received his bachelor's degree in computer science from University of Waterloo in Canada. From there, we'll turn it over to Brad.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Appreciate it. And I too am excited about presenting today. And one of the things that I've realized over the years of 33 years of being involved, I realized I had programmed a lot of data loggers over the years, and I'm excited about this one because it's fairly intuitive, fairly simple to operate and set up, which you don't want a whole lot of time in the field, and especially if it gets cold and you just want to get it out there and get it up and running. But anyway, the LT1, it kind of reminds me, at least the footprint, the size of it is about the size of a Western Digital hard drive. It's fairly small. And just really useful, I think. We have three packages, if you will, that are all built into the same size. The Gos unit has an integrated transmitter. We manufacture that. FTS manufactures that. And so that's as part of it. And then we also have the cellular version, which operates off the Verizon and the 4G LTE networks, providing some two-way communication, and that's evolving on that two-way portion of it. We also have the Iridium version of this, which of course operates on that two-way communication of Iridium, which is extremely useful. The configuration or the sensor setup, we have made this fairly simple as far as the number of channels and so forth, and we believe SDI being kind of an industry standard in hydrology and a lot of the markets we were involved with. Of course, it has SDI 12, and then it also has a counter input for rain gauges and so forth. So that's it's fairly basic, and yet extremely powerful in what it can ultimately do for us. We also, the unit is conformally coated. It does need to be inside of a gauge house or an enclosure to add the protection, but it is conformally coated to protect against some moisture, which is important. Also, the communication to the unit is a couple of different methods. We realize that there should be more than one way of communicating with a data logger, and in this case we've adopted Bluetooth, BLE, low energy. You can communicate on a smart device or a notebook that has Bluetooth, or a laptop that has Bluetooth. So you can communicate with it that way. You can also connect it directly to a USB cable through a computer, a micro USB, and so that's another means. It's really important if you're in the field to be able to have more than one means of communication. The LT1 has a removable hard drive, so very easy to be able to go to the field, pull a data card, swap the card, and take that card with you for collection of data and updating firmware. Okay. This is what the LT1 looks like with the connectors and also the inputs on the Gos and the GPS. We'll talk about each of these. The data terminals, the larger green connector, has SDI 12, as we had mentioned, and counter input. So there's other connections there. Really, with a parallel market, we can do other things with it, but primarily what we're talking about today is SDI and tipping bucket. And then the next green connector is, of course, we power it from 12 volts and access it that way. The SMA plug on the right there is how we communicate through the Gos and the cell communication, and that is an SMA plug. And so when we're dealing with Gos, we have to have a interface or a different connector, an adapter, and that's a female plug there because the type in female goes to GPS or antennas, Yagis, and also our Omni. It also has GPS, so all of our units have GPS, so we know can update, or at least get location and update the clock, which is extremely important. On the top is the SIM card access for the cell version only. So if you have a SIM card, we can pull that little door open and access the SIM card. On the left are the LED status indicators. When you walk up to the site for the first time and it's powered up, those lights don't necessarily are on, but when you use either Bluetooth or the cable, it does wake up and you'll see those lights. There's information in the manual of what those lights mean. Also the port access, if you look at it's got a little rubberized flap there to be able to access the SD card and the micro USB input there. Also the serial number, you can't very see it, it's a little bit blurry, but if you open up the panel, you'll see the serial number. So useful information. We mount this inside the gauge house or the enclosure using DIN rail, commonly a common use item, so we can be able to easily mount. It's very easy to mount that. And so that's the overview of the data logger. There's a lot of more information here, but we're not going to get into some of those details here. We're going to connect this up here in a minute, but I'm going to turn the time over to Sean, let him talk a little bit about the background of this.
Thanks, Brad. The LT1 Gos uses the standard Gos telemetry transmissions that everyone's familiar with. So once configured with a NESDIS ID, a time slot, a specific message type, put all your data in there. On the schedule defined, most Gos systems are obviously an hour. Some can be shorter, some can be longer, but the data will flow into the Gos satellite system and down to NOAA's services and eventually into the LRGS, which is hosted by the USGS or NOAA. That data path hasn't changed at all. It's the same one you're familiar with. We do use an FTS360 configuration app. That's the name of the application. It runs on 3 different platforms to configure the LT1 Gos. Brad's going to demo that a little bit later, but ultimately it has a secure single tap sign on to the station. It's got a number of pages that we think are quite simple for configuration of the LT1 Gos. Putting in your NESDIS ID, your message types, viewing the health of your station, and also viewing the last 72 hours of local data. We've been doing Gos as a company for quite a long time, and we're very familiar with this data path. And one of the things we realized is once you get outside of the USGS and folks that have also been doing Gos for a long time, not a lot of people have infrastructure to collect this data. So FTS has built an optional infrastructure, which we call our FTS360 cloud platform. So this optional infrastructure does some of the features of the USGS. It collects the data, it parses it out, it stores it in secure backed up locations, things like that. But it has some additional features too. So I've kind of got an optional infrastructure piece here. FTS collects that data through a high rate information transfer satellite dish, so an HRIT. That means that you can view or actually alert on your station data roughly 10 seconds after it's transmitted. Depending on how many data points you're transmitting, that can actually be faster, or in some cases, I'll show you a station later with a number of a number of fields that's a couple seconds slower than that. But on average, it's about 10 seconds until you can view your data in our desktop, and you can view that on your desktop or on a mobile device. To enable this, it's very, very easy. You just hit a sync button inside the app. We take all that hard work that you did configuring your local Gos station, and we push it all the way up to the FTS360 cloud platform. That kind of gives you a backup of your config and kicks off the data collection. So the nice thing is there, you don't really have to enter in that detail a second time, less room for user error, less room for typos. So once the data is there, you can kind of take advantage of some of the features of our infrastructure if you wish. So one of the things I like to do as a first thing is set up mission critical alerts. So I want to know if my battery voltage is dropping too low. I'd want to know if I'm missing data or my station went offline. Maybe I had some sort of animal interact with my station and cause it some harm. Or I could also do max and min thresholds, which is pretty key when you're dam monitoring or looking at river monitoring kind of things. If the water gets too low, you might want to shut off that intake of water in a watershed, for example, or too high, you might need to send off some alarms. You can also save time on site. FTS360 has the capability to build sensor templates, so you can use your full big screen monitor, your mouse and keyboard in the comfort of your office and kind of build a template for all the sensors you plan to use in the field. And then once you get in the field, it's a couple of taps to apply that sensor, template to the actual sensor, as opposed to filling out all the SDI fields and units and things like that while on site. Because sometimes if you're using a phone, you could really save your thumbs, or maybe it's just raining out and you don't want to spend all the time out in the wet. 360 can also offer pass-through data, so you can manually download the data in CSV format. That's useful if you want to do your own data analytics in Excel or things like that. If you're, I mentioned that we do have lots of backups of the 360, but if you do want to have that data on site, you can use our RESTful API from a computer program that will download that data continuously into your own database. And last but not least, if you want to get fancy with some of the user permissions, you can also share ownership of these stations. So other folks can go use that single sign-on, and they can get different permission levels within the 360 and access to that station. So it's kind of centralized station management. But I think we've kind of done, oh, I had one more slide to go to. I just kind of wanted to walk you through on this next slide what it would look like setting up your first LT1 Gos. If you hadn't had one before, there's a little bit of prep work. So sometimes FTS will create an account for you, but you're more than willing to sign up on your own. Simply just go to that site, hit sign up. If you're a part of a team, you do want to get invited into that team, but essentially you want to create your email address and password for the whole system. Once that's done, you can move on to the next step, which is really just to download that application. So I mentioned that we had that application available on Windows 10, iPhone or iOS, and also Google's Android. You can go into any of those three platform stores and just search for FTS360 and the app will come up. We have found that there's some IT departments that do limit access to certain apps in the store, and we're happy to help your IT department work through that access. But to get you started, you can also download this directly from our support site. That's the URL there. So you'll just log into that app with the credentials you created in step 1 and head out to the field. When you get into the field, you want to make sure that SD card is inserted. Sometimes it jiggles loose in shipping, or sometimes it's not inserted at all. And then you just fire up the app, which Brad will show you, configure your sensors, and when you're done here, your data will be flowing into those NOAA servers. If you did want to proceed further into step 3, which is using the advantages of FTS360, when you get back from the site and have an internet connection, could be cellular or Wi-Fi, all you have to do is sync the app and we take care of the rest for you. So we back up that station config, and then the 360 will automatically start collecting that data for viewing and exporting with the next transmission. And then you can start using the 360. So as I mentioned in step 4 here, you can just get yourself to the URL, 360.ftsinc.com. Log in again with the same username and password from step 1. And I'll be demoing some of this after Brad, but you'll be able to create some alerts. You can get those battery voltages in your email. You can create sensor templates to save time for the next time you get an LT1. And you can view all your data in pretty much near real time from either your desktop or mobile. Kind of handy if you're taking the bus or sitting on the beach, which is kind of fun. So Brad, I think with that, we should probably get into some demos.
Absolutely. Yes. I'll show you this screen. Now just get it set up here. If you'll share share it so I can open my screen. Okay. You sharing the screen, Sean? There we go. Okay. All right, so just to give you an idea of what you're looking at here, and just give a little bit of background. First of all, I actually have in my office here an LT1 physically set up, powered up, and I actually have it set up to be accessed via Bluetooth or hardwire. And so the first time this app, when it comes up, now obviously this is on my computer, but this would look very similar if you were on your smart device. an iPad or an iPhone or an Android or so forth. And so it would look similar to this. And the first time you log in, you're going to have to obviously enter the information that you would receive from the agency from after that was set up. So you've got an email and a password. I'm just going to hit the login button, and it's going to pull up the agency that is available to me, and we're going to create this FTS sales demo, and I'm going to select that. And this is going to assign the LT1 to that agency. It's a brand new LT1. And so come out right out of the box. And so the first thing that it does is it brings up this station discovery, and it shows us a couple of options that we could either connect via the COM port or the Bluetooth. But before we get into that, I want to just draw your attention to a couple of things that are very useful so you know that you've got support. On the upper left is these 3 lines, and you click on that, and it brings up this little pop-out window. And this is important if you're in the field and you get stuck. We've got a lot of tools and features that are available to be able to help you guys. And so if we click on the support button there, then it brings up our email to tech support, as well as a phone number to be able to call us and the time frame available. The other useful thing is we can save these logs to our device and our PC or our device, and then we can send those log files to tech support, which that gives them very useful information to be able to support us and find out exactly as we set this station up if anything happened to it, or reports and so forth. So it's very useful. So I'm going to click the back arrow button now and go back to this main station discovery. And I'm going to connect to this station with just the COM port. So COM port 3, it detected it. And it's going to come up and ask me for my serial number the first time that I enter it. And I'm going to connect. And then it's going to bring up the main menu. And as I mentioned, there's, I've programmed quite a few data loggers over my career, and this is very intuitive and very useful. There's only a few pages that you really need to access, and so it really doesn't take a lot of time to learn it. This is the main station dashboard, and in here, there's some things that are probably pretty useful. There's no way we can get into all of the screens, even though they're fairly short. But there's a lot of information. First of all, the very top is, you'll notice it says station. Station number is 9952, and that happens to be the serial number. Anything with these little arrows or greater than sign, if we click on those, so I'm going to click on this top one for station name, and I'm going to change this, and I'm going to call this a station name, and you can create any station name that you want, and I'm going to create and call this station demo. And then if you look down here, there's other useful information such as the serial number, the date of manufacture, the firmware version, and so forth. We can also update the firmware. We update the firmware, use it with the card, with Iridium and Cell. That can be done remotely. With Gos, since the chances are you don't have any communication at the site as far as back and forth, we update the firmware through the SD card. I'm going to save this setting now, and it's going to go and tell us that I've made the changes, and then you hit the back arrow, and it goes back to this main screen here. Okay, so a couple of other things here. Notice that everything that kind of in green is if there was no GPS communication right now, that would be red, and the Gos has not been configured. We're going to hit that really briefly, but it's red. It's not been configured. So I have done a couple of things prior to setting this up. I've actually put in a stage sensor. I have on my desk a radar stage sensor, but there's some things that we can do on this screen. We can add more sensors. If we wanted to add other SDI sensors or counters, we could do that from here. And incidentally, notice that the timestamp on the SDI sensor there is 11:25. That's Mountain time. That's where the zone I'm located in. And if I hit refresh again, it's going to come out and take another reading. Now, keep in mind that there are sensors out there that take a long time. If it's a water quality sensor, it may take a while for that to update. Keep in mind that you can still do things in this screen and other screens while that's updating. So it may take make a bit of time, but that takes about 6 seconds. Okay, so if I were to go into this, what I've already set up, if I click on the stage sensor here, I've already, as I mentioned, I've set the address as SDI address 2. It's communicating with the sensor, and we can create friendly names. There's a lot on this screen, but I'm only going to get to a couple things. For example, if I wanted to set a stage in the field on this sensor, I don't have to remember the complicated a manufacturer's SDI command. I can set it from here. So if I hit the set stage, it's going to come up and it's going to take an initial measurement, and I'm going to change that to 4850. I've looked on my staff gauge and I determined this a little bit changed, so I want to save that. It's going to update that, and it's going to tell me that my changes have been made. Now I want to test the sensor. I can hit the test button, and it's going to go out and take a measurement, and there's my measurement and the time that it took that measurement. Then I'm going to save my settings and get out of the sensor window and hit the back button. The other thing now, if you notice down here, it says last 72 hours. I'm going to hit on 2 more things, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Sean. Last 72 hours pulls up information on the site that we can actually see the last 72 hours or other measurements as they've been made. So if I hit the OK button here, it's going to populate all these things since this has been activated in my office. And notice the last 2 measurements that I made. And that's useful if you're in the field and you want to set the stage and you've been down to the staff gauge and set the stage, you can be able to see exactly what it was reading when you set that stage. Extremely useful. Incidentally, we can data management, or at least pulling up the data, is, like I said, is coming from the SD card. So if we want to pull the data from the device, we pull that card out and then transfer it to our PC. That's how we collect data. The only means is we have the last 72 hours here. So we, at this point, don't have the ability to collect data through the USB or the Bluetooth. Last thing I want to mention is this button up here to the upper right. This allows us to sync with FTS360, providing we have a connection. If I hit that button there, it's going to sync everything the changes that I've made at the site. And we hit sync now, and it goes up and updates that. Now, when we get to Sean, you'll see the station name rather than the serial number. It will be demo. And that's really all. There's other things, but I'm going to turn the time back over to Sean to finish.
Hey, Brad.
Yes.
I just have a question. So you mentioned that the green indicators over there says that means it's set up properly. What is the red and the yellow?
Sorry. Good point. Thanks, Gary. Apologize. I meant to get into the Gos menu. The red means it hasn't been set up, and I didn't get into the Gos, but I just wanted to at least show you this screen. There's really only one screen with the Gos menu. So there's our NESDIS ID and our randoms, our transmission intervals, and so forth. So we set it up right from this screen. But yes, Gary, if it's in red, it doesn't have the it hasn't updated, or it's not running. So you just need to keep that in mind. So that's why that little satellite there appears in red. It's because it's not been configured. Thank you, Gary. Okay, Sean.
Thanks. Just loading up my screen here. So as mentioned earlier in the slide deck, I'm going to show you the FTS360 cloud platform. Brad's shown you the FTS360 configuration app, which is used for on-site configuration. Because he hit the sync button, it's kind of like a sneaker net. It gets all that configuration that Brad spent a lot of time doing on his station up to the 360. So when you come back to when you come into Civilization again, and you're logging into this URL of FTS360 or 360.ftsinc.com, I'm going to use the exact same username and password that Brad used to log into his system. If I forgot my password, I can have it emailed to me just by clicking this link. But we'll go and we'll log in here, and we end up at the initial page of the 360. So as you can see here, there's multiple stations in this agency. And sort of the primary view here is we show you where all your stations are located. These GPS coordinates can be set manually in this UI. Or they can be set by the station. So there's two ways that they get set by the station. In stations that transmit their GPS coordinates, we automatically update the location of those stations. So we do have some stations that move around and portable, whatever it is, so away they go. But one of the neat things about using that sync button that Brad showed you for the LT1 Gos is you don't really want to spend your time transmitting GPS coordinates that never change. So we actually collect the GPS coordinates from the station while that app is connected, and then we transmit them to the 360. So the station's actual GPS coordinates are transmitted via the app to the station, which provide the location of all these stations. So just a little bit about your display here. So your main menu is down the side. We're going to look at all stations is kind of your map view. You can change the map view to kind of what you'd like to see. You can filter on some of your data types, those types of things. Also over here, we have a data download. So if you click on this area, you might, by default, we assume you want to download all the data, but perhaps you just want to download from one specific station, and we'll download the last 24 hours. I've got some additional options. So if your importing system has a missing data field that it's looking for, you can enter that in here and we'll insert it for you for missing data. When you download that, the data is collected in a CSV format, and this is probably going to open up on a secondary monitor here. So I will drag it over, and you can see that I've just got, my station ID, my station name, the UTC data timestamp, and then all the data that station has transmitted in that time period. So yeah, so you can download that, you can graph those things in Excel, or you could import them into another system.
So Sean, you're saying that I can sit in my office and download the data. I don't need to go out all the time and actually get my data. I could do it right from this particular
That's
website.
correct. That's correct. So assuming the station is transmitting correctly and you're transmitting all the fields that you wish to view, there's no need to get in your truck and drive out to site. You can simply just go here, download the data into a CSV format, and from there you can manipulate it however you see fit. So save yourself a trip out to site, always a good thing. The next section I wanted to show was the notifications. This brings a lot of the power of the 360 of the data coming to you instead of you having to go check the data. So I mentioned during my slide presentation, and we'll go ahead and choose Brad's demo station, which we'll show in a second. I can take that stage value that's been transmitted, and I can look for a maximum threshold, and I believe Brad's stage was quite high at 4850. So at 4,900 feet, I'm going to go ahead and request a email when that happens. So if you do have a camera station, we can also take some other actions. I'll skip that for the brevity of this conversation. But right now, I'm saying if the 360 receives the data for the stage value over 4,900, when I hit save, that will automatically send me an email, so I don't have to consistently see if I'm getting close. I'll just know that I'll get an alert when that happens. I'm going to create one more alert. what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at Brad's station again, and I'm going to say if the station is offline. So in the station offline case, I'd like to get an email if you know, an animal chewed through a cable, or if the battery completely depleted for some, you know, technical reason or things like that. On the second missed data point, I'll get an email. So we allow sort of some leeway for maybe a single missed data point. Maybe there was a transmission error, but 2 missed data points are definitely a station offline. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this piece of UI. Often these sites are pretty far away. You can't get out to them immediately to go fix them. It might be a day or two. So what I can actually do is I can limit this to every 12 hours. So the instant it believes the station is offline, it's going to send me an email, and then it's going to store all the other values that's offline for 12 hours and then send me a summary email at the end of those 12 hours. And it'll continuously do that until the problem is corrected. So I'll go ahead and save this one. And then when I go back to notifications, I can kind of see I've got my station name here, and I can kind of see the different alerts I have. And this last occurrence is blank. I find this last occurrence really useful because it actually saves the last time that alert happened. You know, so if your manager pops in and says, hey, when was the last time that demo station was offline? You can simply open this up, find the station offline, and you say, hey, it's never been offline. There's been no occurrence of that ever happening. So it's a solid station. So you can kind of use it a little bit in that way as well, kind of to get a little bit of the history of your station. We also talked briefly about custom sensor templates. So in this case, we've got some custom user-made templates. So these are custom sensor templates. And then we also have the concept of built-in sensor templates. The built-in sensor templates are the ones that FTS has provided. So we've done the work of reading the manuals, mostly for our sensors, and we've done the work to configure the 360 as a template. So Brad was using a FTS radar stage sensor. So if I go ahead and click on this one, I can kind of see that it already has a friendly name here. It already knows what command it needs to run for SDI. It knows the first field is stage, and we're going to call it STG. Using these templates, you know, helps with the decoding of stations. So even if you aren't using the 360 to view data, instead you're having the USGS decode it for you. You can make sure that your field names are consistent, so the decodes guys on the back ends aren't calling you, hey, you called one ST and the other STG. So you can kind of keep consistency among your stations in your own agency consistent by using sensor templates. You can give it a friendly name and then define the units here that we're using to collect all that. Let's say, for example, this is a custom sensor that FTS has made for you, but maybe you don't want to spend the time collecting the quality field. You can go ahead and just edit this template, and you can delete that, and then you can save this, and it'll say, hey, you can't change one of our built-in sensors, but you can create it as a new sensor yourself. So you can go ahead and save that, and then since I didn't change the name, it just added the timestamp, which is today right here with that one data point, that stage data point. So I can name these ones, and I can go in here and rename this at any point that I wanted. So I can call this, you know, my radar sensor. And I can save that, head back to that page, and there we go. And now we can tell my techs in my group here that you know, they can manage, they can apply this radar sensor. They don't have to type all that in on site. When we get into stations, I'm going to head back here. I've got a MET station that I wanted to show you, and it's just because it's transmitting quite a bit of data. It lets us show some of the configuration and some of the power of the 360 graphing capabilities. So by default, when we load this up, we're going to show you the very first data point that's at the top. And you can sort of customize this page in the configure display. You can choose what's at the top, what you see first. You can choose what might be health data, what might not be health data if you want to do that. And the other thing you can do as you come in here, when you sometimes add some of these things in here, you can end up with crunched data points down here. So I've got a whole bunch of data points. I can see the actual values if I hover over them, but I might want to just zoom in on this. So I can kind of just change that graph by dragging and dropping on my PC and getting a big detail, and then double clicking to get back. Up here, I can change my, I can view more than a week of data. I can kind of look back on that. When this box is ticked right here, this live data box, this page will automatically upload as data arrives. So if you just wanted to have this on one of your monitors in your office, you could load up your station and it would automatically continue to plot that data without you having to refresh the page or anything like that. The last thing I kind of wanted to show you is if I go into edit station here, I can actually configure my Gos message. So in this place, this is where the FCA will pre-populate all this data. So if I spent a lot of time on site typing all this in, the last thing I want to do is get back to the office and type it all in again. So using that app to sync to the 360 will send all these field names, the different orders, the units, the decimal places, the ordering, the NESDIS ID, all that gets transmitted back to the 360, and we automatically start collecting this data as we go. So Gary, I think that's going to end my demo unless you had any other questions or there were any questions you wanted to ask in the chat. So I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Sean. Let's see. All righty, thank you. That was great. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Brad. Just in summary, before we jump into some questions, I just wanted to kind of summarize what we've gone over. In the beginning, we covered the actual DCP itself, the LT1 Gos, went over some of its features and so forth. And then Brad demonstrated the FTS360 configuration app. And so that's where you're going to program and configure the DCP itself. And you can do that through Bluetooth on either an iOS/Apple or Android or Windows app. You can also directly connect to it with a micro USB cable. And then Sean went over the FTS360 cloud software, where you can manage some of your data, view it, set alerts, and do some configuration that way. The reason that I go over this summary, I was in a meeting not too long ago online, and someone said that the two 360s, the names of the two of them can be a little confusing. One said, can one be called 359? So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear when we're talking about 360, there's a cloud software and then there's a configuration app. So with that being said, let's see if we have any questions here. I see one here that says, can the logger be set to standard time? Any one of you want to retrieve that one?
Sure, I can handle that one. So the logger will transmit and store its data completely in UTC. That enables the fluent collection of data through daylight savings times and moving stations around. In the display areas in the app that Brad demoed, that's going to show you the data in local time or UTC time, depending on how you ask. And in the FTS360, you have much more time zone options where you can choose to view the data in station time. So if you have stations that span time zones and you want to view one in Mountain Time and one in Pacific Time, you can select station time and view it there. And you can honor daylight savings time or not. So we do collect data in UTC, but we do display data in users' local time zones.
So it's however someone desires it then, John, is that correct?
Yes.
Good, awesome. Here's another question. Can you download data from the micro USB?
I'll take that, Gary. No, at this point, we cannot. We're going to look into some options there, but at this point, we take we've got the last 72 hours. You can't download that, but you can view it. And that's kind of a feature at the site. But the data download is coming through the SD card. So we just simply, one of the things I like to tell people to do is have an extra SD card when you go to the site and swap it out and then put a new card in, and then you just take that card and put it in your PC. So at this point, no.
Okay. Next question. How does collaboration work when you have multiple people servicing the same site?
Cool, I can take that one. That's something that we've facilitated through the FTS360 I mean, I may be a little biased, but works quite well. One of the things I didn't demo today was user management. So if you created, if you went through the sign up process, you would be an administrator within your area of the 360. And you could control who's administrators, who's technicians, and who's viewers. So administrators and technicians all have access to sites. So the way that that would work is you would definitely need to use the 360 in that case. So when you go to site for the first time, we have a password on the station to prevent unauthorized access. That password is synced to the 360 and then synced down to other users' devices. So they can go ahead and use that same password if they're in your area of the 360. The benefit of that is as people leave your agency, they no longer work for you, they no longer need access to the LT1. Simply removing their user from the 360 prevents them from accessing the DCP, even though they know the locations of these out in the field. So it's a way to keep your network secure without having to go and visit all the sites and change local passwords on DCPs. So a simple sync to the 360 by all the technicians who will be sharing a specific site should allow access to that site for all technicians.
Yeah, it is a nice feature there, Sean, that you guys have put in there where the security of it is pretty good. I mean, if you have an LT1 at a site where a lot of people could be out there, it certainly eliminates the possibility of someone being able to get in and tinker with your site. Here's another one. It says, we had a problem where a sensor was reading millibar pressure rather than feet. Can you do that kind of detailed sensor configuration through this menu system from the laptop or the mobile device?
I think I understand the question there, Gary, is if you want to change the units.
Right.
Okay, yes. I was just going to say that the units are programmed as the template is created. If we create a user-defined template for a specific sensor, we have the ability of changing the type of sensor and the units, and you see it in the app. And then that translates over into 360. So yeah, we have full capability of changing units. Sean, do you have any other comment there?
The only thing I would add is, I mean, Brad talked through exactly how you would change the units. The only thing I would add is if you happen to have any Canadians on staff like myself, I get really lost in imperial measurements. So if I'm using the 360, I'm able to change the display of those units just for me. So they don't actually change how they're stored or how they're collected. The units are just displayed into a metric one, so I can actually understand them living up here in Canada. So that's the only other benefit with units when you bring in the FTS360 cloud platform.
Awesome. I hope that that was clear. Here's a good question. I have an agency already set up when Jim was in the office. Would all of my technicians need to be on that same agency?
They don't have to all be in the same agency, although it will make configuration and display of the data different. So one user would have access to a subset of stations, another user would have access to a different subset of stations. There are multiple ways to sort of work around this. You can add users to multiple agencies. I think that adds a lot of complexity. So the better way is to actually work with our support team. Brad sort of called out a great way to get in touch with our support team. We do have very good support at FTS. If you call, an actual person will answer. They can help you merge those agencies together. So moving stations around and moving users around so that you do end up all in one agency, and it just might make your life a little bit easier in that case. So we're here to help. Our support team, works specific hours, specific time. They're pretty early to account for the East Coast. So feel free to look that up, give us a call, and we'll help you untangle any of that stuff.
Awesome. It looks like we have one more question. When initiating communication with DCP, it's stated that the agency did not exist, although the agency was created with myself as administrator and 3 other users.
Oh, it's pretty specific. It sounds like we should probably handle that on a support call. I'd urge you to give one of the other amazing Seans at the company a call. Usually it's a Sean that answers our help desk calls. So we'd be happy to help solve that problem. It's a little too specific to answer on a webinar, I think.
Awesome. Well, this has been great.
Gary, I just wanted to say that number again. That number is 800-548-4264. So that gets you right to tech support.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Notice here on this slide as well, let me just clear this as well. So FTS is part of Advanced Environmental Monitoring company, and you can see some of the other brands that are also part of the company. Brad and I are also involved in working closely with FTS, High Sierra, and One Rain. We're providing their products as well. So if you have any questions, really, if you have any questions on any of these brands, we could certainly help you. And if we don't know the answers, we can certainly get you in the right direction. So also, just in closing, if you have any questions that we didn't cover, or you just want to chat about some of our products and so forth, you want to talk to either one of us, here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. We certainly would love to chat with you. We've enjoyed this. We hope it's been beneficial to you all, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks for the time today.